Hello, and welcome to another reading wrap up for the month. As you can see, I am doing this in a little bit of a different format than usual. I set up a reading journal for 2024, and instead of just sitting in my kitchen with my cup of coffee and talking you guys through all the books that I read in the month previously, I figured that I'd actually show you guys updating that reading journal. So, it's part of my goals for the year to be a little bit more creative, so you're going to see a little bit of that come out here in this setup, but I am excited to get into the books and everything else. So if you watch my reading journal setup, thank you so much. Every time I see a comment on that video or even just like the view count going up, it just makes my heart so happy. I didn't think that sharing something so dear and personal to me would actually resonate so much with all of you. So thank you so much for that. As you can see, I basically just set up a January title page here with a calendar at the front of the month. And looking back at this is kind of funny. I actually did not mean to use the hearts in that spread. I just had them out, and I think I was so used to doing it from my February Bujo setup that I just started sticking the hearts everywhere. And then when I get to my February setup, there's like not a heart in sight. It's kind of weird. But essentially, this is just kind of like a title page for the month for me. I do like to have kind of a loose list of things that I might read, so that's why it says to maybe read there. And luckily, I did actually finally manage to tackle 2 of the books on this list. So come and get it, and This Could Be Us can finally be crossed off my TBR list. If you've been here with me for the past couple of months, you know that I've been trying to read those books for easily the past 4 months. Like, I have been talking about these books nonstop and just haven't read them. So we finally did that. So the first set of books that I read for 2024, I actually started on January 1st at 2 a.m. I could not sleep on New Year's, and it just started reading this book and ended up reading the entire series. And it all started with Claiming Carter. So that is actually book 1 in the Waverly Wildcats series. It's a football romance set at college. It follows the 4 boys who are players on the team, and then the woman who they end up dating. And entire series is told in dual point of view. I had previously read Claiming Carter. I think this might be kind of the third-ish time that I've kind of dabbled into this book. I did have a review of it a couple months ago, and I did say that my initial thoughts were that it was too long. And that was because it felt like it dragged. So much happened, but there was also a lot of really positive things that I liked in the book, which I think is why I keep kind of looking back at it. And admittedly, I keep seeing ads for it on TikTok and getting kind of sucked in to the story. So, or I'd see an ad for it. What happened this time was I saw an ad for it and I was like, oh, I don't really remember that happening. When did that happen? But either way, I ended up reading the entire series. I did create kind of a football theme because it is kind of college football-y. So we have the football that I drew on that screen, and honestly, how many times can I say football at this point? And I created kind of a little playbook thing there. I don't know what those mean. I don't play football at all. Even though I have friends who played football professionally, I do not know what any of those symbols mean on that page. So let's hope it makes sense. And yeah, basically I started with Claiming Carter. So it basically this was the book that I reread. It's the first book in the series, and essentially it just follows Carter, who gets recruited onto the boys' football team to help them out as a kicker after their kicker has an unfortunate accident. She is very STEM oriented. She agrees to do it because she needs a football scholarship, or she needs a scholarship actually, so that she could support herself through school, and through there she ends up actually dating the quarterback of the team and the captain who actually recruited her for the position. I loved how she is unwavering in her love of STEM and how she does not let the sport and all these things that people are saying, like, you could do this, you could do that, how she does not let that take her away from wanting to still pursue engineering. I thought it was really well done. It's a really good depiction of everything, and kind of rereading it is what made me move on to Catching Quinn. Catching Quinn covers Cooper and Quinn's story. So Quinn is one of the teammates' little sister, and she runs into Cooper, and she's very inexperienced with kind of dating and relationships, and she's asking him if he could help her out, and he's like, I can't, like, you are my teammate's little sister. And things just kind of like evolve from there. They are kind of like, he avoids it, she chases him a little bit. It's fun, there's banter, they definitely have a little bit of a friendship going on as well, and then eventually he's like, fine, I will help you. And some like incidents happen through that as well, but you know, at the end they end up dating. There is a really big kind of like family issue that is addressed in here for Cooper, and I was not expecting it. It is something that's very like deep and kind of traumatizing for him, but I found that it was done so well, and actually is what made me like this book even more. Like, it's not just a fluffy romance. There's actually something like really serious that is dealt with throughout this book. And of the 4 books in the series, I have to say I actually think this one was my favorite one. Like, I am obsessed with Cooper. I'm obsessed with Quinn. I loved it from start to finish. Like, easily my favorite, like, number 1 for the book series for me. After that is Scoring Sutton by Jennifer Bonds, and it follows actually probably my second favorite book in the series after Catching Quinn. And it follows Sutton and DJ Parker, and Sutton has pranked the football team because she absolutely hates them, and she kind of just despises how they are in general. She's a collegiate gymnast, and it turns out that DJ is also her like neighbor, and she gets caught and punished for the prank that she plays on the football team, and the punishment is that she has to be their like mascot for the year. No one knows who is actually in the costume, so she's kind of like running and cheering for DJ and the rest of the football team, and they don't know that it's her. And then she also has a class with DJ, and they end up working together on like it's not necessarily a project, but they're both like studying for something together, and they enter into a bit of a friends with benefits relationship. I also really liked it. Like I said, second book in the story. Second favorite in the series, and it was good. And then we got to Protecting Piper, which I literally wrote down in my notes that this series should have been 3 books because Protecting Piper was just like not it. It follows Piper and like this, our main character. I can't even remember what his name is, to be honest. And she's a little bit like insecure. Well, she's very confident, but she's also insecure in how she makes her money. And she's like struggling to kind of like get through. He is, I don't even know, like they describe him as a cinnamon roll, but like I literally wrote, he's a cinnamon roll, but almost too much so. He's a bit too insta love for my taste, and he's gave off stalker vibes a few times. So that should tell you everything you need to know about my feelings for this book. Like, he was horrible. I also have a note where he got a tattoo, and I was like, WTF, like, why would you do that? So I didn't like it. It just wasn't good. And then there's like this whole thing that happens at the kind of like a third act kind of, it was not a breakup, but this thing happens in the third act that I was just like, why are we doing this? Like, too much, trying to do too much all at once, and this is horrible. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Protecting Piper. Overall, the series is like, the whole series as a whole, the 4 books are I'd say like it's a solid 3-star series for me, maybe 3.5 stars. Protecting Piper can go, but the rest of the series is great. On the plus side was actually one of my really anticipated books for 2024. Actually, I really like Jenny L. Howe's books. She does a lot of books that are like centered on body positivity. So you do have main characters who are in bigger bodies, and usually it's actually like both characters who are in bigger bodies. Um, and it was nice. Like you get away from descriptions of people as, oh, like she was so small she could break, which is just like unrealistic. Like someone who is so small that like if you look at them too hard they would break. Realistically, we are hoping that they are getting like medical help. If that's the case, like we don't want people who can break. So I just like Jenny L. Howe's books. Essentially, I have not read one yet that I have disliked, and the stories are always kind of based on more than just the main character's appearance, and there's a little bit more depth to them. So on the plus side follows Everly Winters, who is obsessed with this TV show called On the Plus Side. It is described as a bit of like a What Not to Wear meets Queer Eye kind of vibe to it, and she gets nominated to be on the show by some mystery person, and while she's there she thinks things are going one way and she ends up actually falling in love with the cameraman Logan, and it's just kind of like amazing from start to finish. I kind of have a soft spot, I've realized, for books that kind of break that fourth wall between like movies or like on set of a show. Like I really liked Alison Cochran's oh, I'm completely forgetting the name of this book, but I love it. I'll make sure to put it pop it up there for you guys. But The Charm Offensive. I really like The Charm Offensive by Alison Cochran, which also breaks kind of like that fourth wall a bit and goes behind the scenes of a reality TV show, or if it's set on like a movie set and you're getting kind of like behind the scenes. I love that. I will eat it up every day. And On the Plus Side really does kind of give that to you. It's a trope that I'm starting to realize that I enjoy. I also really like how this kind of talks about how TV, and especially reality TV, is not necessarily what we're seeing. Like it is fake, and I loved how it points that out. So it was a 4-star read for me. Definitely recommend. And then after that I read When Grumpy Met Sunshine by Charlotte Stein. So I received an ARC copy of this to read. I really wanted to like it. But I didn't. It was, I had actually DNF'd it at like 56% of the way through. And I'm counting it as a book read, and I'm counting it for ratings because I did read 56% of that book. Usually I'm like, if I read over 25% of the book, it counts as a book read because I am trying. This had all the elements that you would think I would like. It's a British author. It's set in Britain. It has a whole bunch of charm. Well, it's supposed to have a whole bunch of charm to it. And I like hated this book. Like I could not do it. It fell really flat for me. The entire thing is just our one main character. I think her name's Alfie. No, that's the man. I forget what the girl's name is. Like it was so bad. Mabel. She's just like complaining the entire time that she is like so in her head. And I really wanted to be like, give Alfie a chance to talk. Like things between the two of them would work out if she stopped thinking for like even a second and let him say words to her. Like there's a scene where he's trying to give her back her phone and she pepper sprays him without even like paying attention to what he's doing. She assumes what he's thinking and going to say at all times. Like it's really bad. And like to be in her head was not good. Like I just really, really struggled, and it's so hard because this was supposed to be Grumpy Sunshine. I actually don't know who was Grumpy and who was Sunshine in this entire story, but I gave it 2 stars because I did read 56% of it and it kept me on for that long. But yeah, I had high hopes and it let me down. Speaking of high hopes, I also read Collide by Bal Khabra. And I was sucked in by TikTok for this, which I feel like we need to have a conversation at some point about books on TikTok. But I was sucked in. Everyone said that this was great, that it was amazing. It was so good. Aiden is like, up there with like the Garrett Grahams. I This was not for me. This was another 2-star read for me. I didn't find it as great as everyone was saying. You know, I just wanted for Aiden to get away from Summer. Summer is a bit narcissistic. I found that her reason for hating hockey players is a bit shallow or not fully like formed. Like she just kind of, it came across immature, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like she hates hockey players because of her dad, but she also like doesn't fully like articulate all the reasons why she hates hockey players because of her dad. She just hates them because like her dad's a hockey player. And yeah, immaturity just like really kind of like breaks through with this. And for someone who's like studying psychology, I'm kind of like, girl, you need a therapist. You should evaluate where your daddy issues come from and get help for them. And she picks a lot of fights, and this entire book is literally just Aiden running after her and trying to get her to use her words and communicate. And that should not be a hard thing for her to do. But she just absolutely refuses. She just runs. Also, I hated how the synopsis tells you that you're getting one story, but that project and that whole like they're forced to do a project together thing gets completely wrapped in like the first 20% of the book. And the rest of it is just the two of them just like hooking up. And honestly, like that's all they do. They just hook up nonstop. And then she like runs away and refuses to use her words while this poor boy is like chasing after her and being like, please speak to me. It was not that good. I don't think it's up there with the rest of them. But, let me know if you think I'm wrong. Let me know if I'm missing something here that makes it really good. Like, it was not for me. I just found it really long and a little bit tedious and just not it. If that makes sense. Okay, and then I read In the Weeds by B.K.Borison, which is actually the second book in the Love Light Farm series. I read Love Light Farms because in the December, because I was just looking for like a Christmas novel. And oh my god, I also saw this on TikTok a lot, but this book is so good, and this series, like, it has me absolutely hooked. So In the Weeds essentially follows Evelyn St. James, who is that influencer from book 1 who comes to the farm for them, and Beckett, that like grumpy farmer, and she goes back to the town that Love Light Farms is in because she is like looking for the last place that she felt happy. So she goes back, she ends up staying with Beckett, and it is like the sweetest thing. Like these two people are just like cohabitating. They're not even like dating. They're just like living together. But he does like the nicest things for her. Like just, those like simple gestures of care that are just kind of like unspoken, but just so nice. Like he does those. Like he leaves coffee for her in a thermos on the counter when he goes to work. And I just, honestly, hook, line, and sinker for this book. I actually started on my birthday, so I started listening to it. I got my hair done on my birthday, then I went to a coffee shop and literally was just like sipping my coffee and like swooning over Everly and Beckett. But I loved this story, and I'm like so sad that I slept on this author for so long, but also kind of happy because now there's 3 books in the series, so I could just like power through all 3. But I'm also kind of holding back because I don't want it to end. But In the Weeds by B.K.Borison, easily like one of the best things I read so far this year. Like it's 4 stars. I am obsessed with this book, if you can't tell. And then after that, I finally got to 2 of my most anticipated books. I have been sitting on arcs of these for so long, like easily months. And the reason why I have put off reading them is just out of like fear. Um, I really thought Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan was so good. So This Could Be Us, the sequel to that series, I was actually really worried that it would let me down a little bit. And, I should know better. It was really good. This one follows Soledad and Judah. And essentially, Soledad is, we kind of are introduced to her in book one. She's one of the ladies in the friend group, and her husband is like a piece of trash. Like, he is just not great, as we know in Before I Let Go. So it starts with him ending up getting like arrested, and he goes to jail. And Judah is our male main character, who is actually kind of like helps him get arrested in a way. Like, he finds out the crime that Edward commits, and then they end up having a relationship, like Soledad and Edward. I love how she shows autism throughout this book, and I do know Kennedy Ryan also has a child who has autism, so she has very much like firsthand knowledge of what it's like to parent a child with that, and she does an amazing job of portraying it throughout the book. For Judah, I found Soledad was on this journey of like self-discovery that is absolutely beautiful to see, and the two of them come together, and I just like 5 stars all around for this book. Like, I was hooked while reading it. Like, I could not put this down, and at one point I was actually sad that I have an arc of it, because I wanted the ebook as well, so that when I had to leave my house, I could also be listening to this book. And then the second most anticipated book on my list was Come and Get It by Kiley Reid. And I just have to say, like, why are ampersands so hard to write? Like, that ampersand was so messed up there that I then messed up writing it because I was so focused on how bad it looked. But Come and Get It by Kiley Reid was another book that's been on my list forever. Like I said, I had an arc of it, and she wrote Such a Fun Age, which came out like 3-ish years ago. It was 2020 that it came out, and I really was worried with this book. So this is her sophomore novel. I was excited to read it because I loved Such a Fun Age so much, but I was also really scared that this might be a case of like a sophomore slump. And it's always the worst when your favorite author has a book come out and you were like, please be good, please be good, please be good, and then it's not. But there is no sophomore slump here. Come and Get It follows Agatha and Millie are kind of like our 2 main characters, and they intersect at a school. Agatha is a professor. Millie is a residence. She's a residence assistant. She's an RA. And they kind of, it's like a discussion about power and money and class. And I know a lot of people are going to say this book has no plot, and it doesn't really, but it's plotless on purpose. Like, I found that it needed to not have a plot, and it needed for like nothing to kind of happen for the majority of the story, so that you could have that conversation and it could just be a backdrop for the conversation on race and class and ethics and how all of those like intersect with like socioeconomic status and money. Like, it is a really brilliant book, but you do need to go into it knowing that like it's going to challenge you a bit, and you're going to be reading and it's going to be kind of the same thing. Like, it just follows dorm life in a really good way. And I think for some people that's uncomfortable, some of the questions and things that it highlights, but brilliant is kind of all I have to say. Like, this book is so amazing, and Kiley Reid broke the sophomore slump, which I am so happy for. And I'm willing to wait another 3 years for another book from her because this is brilliant and you need to go read it. Next on the list for me was Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. So I mentioned it in my reading setup, but this was actually a book club pick for my in-person book club in my community. We opted to read a fantasy novel and Red Queen won. So I had actually read this book before. I used to actually read a lot of fantasy, I'm realizing, and I don't know what happened, but I stopped. But essentially, I read Red Queen when it first came out, and I was like obsessed with this book. I read the first 3 books in the series, and I just didn't read like the last 1 or 2. So as I was delving into Red Queen for book club, I was like, I know this story like really well, and kind of found myself wondering like I remember things that happened in later books while I was reading book 1, and I was just like, girl, stay away from that man, like he's not good. But like it doesn't this happen. But all that to say, I really enjoyed it. Mary's still a character that I root for the entire time, and I love kind of like this intersection of how she is like this red blood and then there's the silvers, and she's like this listed as this Red Queen because she has powers but they don't understand how she has powers, and so she gets like whisked away to be a princess in the court because they have to explain to people why this like supposedly red girl has silver powers. And I just found it really interesting and really good. I do have to say that having reread the series as an adult, like it is very much a young adult series, and in book club we even mentioned like there's parts where she talks about how they kiss and she's like, oh my god, like our lips touched, and you're like, okay, like is anything else gonna happen? Like it's not a lot, but like for a YA book, like that's a lot. But I did find that rereading it as an adult, there were moments where I was like, okay, like that's not that deep, girl. Like you are okay. You can kind of move on. And I had to remind myself, like, wait a minute, she is like 14 or 15, maybe 16 at most in this book. Like she is a child. Her reactions are going to be very childlike. She does not have a fully developed prefrontal cortex. Like we are dealing with children in this story who are in this wild circumstance that she doesn't know how to deal with, and it makes sense. So all that to say, I really enjoyed it. I'm actually planning to read the rest of the books in the series. So reread book 2 and 3 and then 4, and then like a first time read for 4 and 5, because I enjoyed it a lot, and I have, it just really solidifies my realization that I need to read more like fantasy books because I enjoy them so thoroughly, and truly this was a good 3-star read for me. And then I dove into my very, very pink spread for Emma Lord. So Emma Lord is actually one of my favorite authors. She's also like a YA author. She does occasionally write like a, I guess like an adult contemporary fiction book, but she wrote Tweet Cute, and I actually received an arc of that as well, as how I was introduced to her. And I read that book it was the first book that I read of the year, and it came out in January, and absolutely like gobbled it up. And she has proceeded to kind of release books almost every other year, usually in January. And it's usually like she will get like the January 2nd spot for a book release. So for the longest while, if Emma Lord had a book coming out in that year, sometimes it was my first book of the year that I read. All that to say, the Getaway list came out on January 23rd. I absolutely devoured this book. I did receive an arc of this one and her book that's coming out later this year as well. It is a young adult novel, and it follows 2 teenagers. It follows Riley and Tom, and Riley is our female main character, she realizes that her high school years have been pretty like boring and dull. So she has done everything right. She goes to school, she's part of extracurriculars, but she's just like not having fun. And she, after graduation, she decides to go to New York City to see her best friend Tom, who moved away because his mom's like screenwriting job took them to New York City, and he was unable to stay. So she goes, they tackle what they call their getaway list, which is essentially just like a bucket list through the summer. And Riley really kind of like comes to terms with who she is. I thought she was really mature as well. Like Tom at one point is like, well, I'm happy where you are and you make me happy. And Riley has this moment where she's like, I can't make you happy. You need to make yourself happy. Like you can't put that on a person. But essentially it's just this really beautiful story about friendship. There's found family in there. Riley kind of has this kind of rough relationship with her mom, which she sorts out as well. And I just really enjoyed it completely. I do also have to point out that I said it was a very pink spread, and I recently picked up some new fountain pen ink. And I haven't really talked about that a lot on here, but I'm obsessed with like stationery and pens. But yeah, I picked up some new fountain pen ink, and it is the Diamine Hope Pink, which I absolutely love. I purchased a sample of this ink, and I'm like, I need to go back and get the full bottle because it's the prettiest pink as we're writing, and it just gives me so much joy. And then the other book by Emma Lord that I read this month was The Breakup Pact. So this is a romance. I received an arc of it as well. It comes out in the summer, July, I believe. And you actually don't see me writing here for this book. And that is because I actually, like when I was filming this, I was actually like actively reading the book and wasn't far enough into the book to write down my thoughts on it. So essentially, this is a book that follows June and Levi, who both have experienced like these viral breakups. June's happens on a TV show, kind of gives me like Shark Tank vibes. She gets broken up with, and then Levi has his girlfriend just starts dating a celebrity or cheats on him with a celebrity, and it's very public. But essentially, they meet back up in their hometown. June and Levi used to be like childhood friends, but they grew apart, and then there was a tragedy as well that happened to them that kind of like sealed the deal on that for them, and they just haven't really spoken since. And they soon decide that they're going to actually go through like this fake dating scenario so that they can kind of like redeem themselves and people will stop hassling them and everything else. Okay, I have actually finished reading this book because it took me so long to get this up that I actually have time to go back and record another voiceover for you guys about my full thoughts on the Breakup Pact. But essentially, I enjoyed the premise of the book and everything that it represented. And I'm like, yay for Emma Lord for taking a kick at the can and doing an adult novel. But I found that the book dragged a little bit. So it was a bit repetitive at times. And I found that I would be thinking that I'm like 50 or 75% of the way through the story. And it would turn out that I actually was like 20% in. And that just felt really weird at times. And the pacing felt a little bit off because they go from fake dating really quickly. Like within the first 2 chapters, they make this decision that they are going to fake date after they haven't spoken in so long. And then it just kind of goes into this like slow burn, but it wasn't really a slow burn because no fire was on. Like the burner was off. And it like slowly burns for like a good what feels like 60% of the book, but there's not tension being built while they're like slow burning. So our main character June is talking about how like, oh, I saw him and we went on this fake date and we needed to get this and we need to get that, but there's no actual like tension that you're feeling of her wanting our other character, she just kind of states it, but you don't feel it, if you understand what I mean. I also found that it's very much written like a YA novel. So once I kind of reminded myself that Emma Lord had previously written YA novels, reading it, I could see how this was like a YA novel that's tried to make it a little bit older, but it still kind of is a YA novel. They are adults, so they're able to like drink wine and, you know, do things without parental approval and everything else. But it's just, it still reads very juvenile, and the characters come across very juvenile. And I think the beauty of Emma Lord's YA books are that the characters are so well written, but that doesn't translate. Those same traits and things that a child might do don't necessarily transfer into what would be acceptable or loved about an adult character. So I did find that there were moments where I kind of scratched my head or rolled my eyes at the characters a little bit, and just kind of wanted to reach through the page and kind of shake them and be like, figure out what you're doing here. Yeah, it was really good. And all that to say, like, I know you'd probably thinking that I'm going to say that it's like a 1-star book for me or a 2-star book, but it actually is a 3-star. When I was going through like the compile guide, I realized that I actually do. It is a 3-star read for me still. Not as high as like within that 3 range for me as like the Getaway list or other books that I have rated 3 stars, but I did completely finish it. I did enjoy the story. I did connect with the characters. I know I didn't connect with them as much as I would have liked to, or as I have in previous books, but I did still connect with them. And the writing in it is good. My issue was just the pacing of it, because I wanted it to be a little bit more. I just wanted a little bit more things to happen, but not more like repetitive things to happen, if that makes sense. But all that to say, The Breakup Pact by Emma Lord was another 3-star book for me, and thank you so much to Emma Lord for the advanced reader copy. I was so excited to read this. I still am. But I just think that, you know, it's her first adult book. There's always room for improvement. It's something new, and I always have to give someone kudos for trying something new. After that, I dived into Evil Eye, which was a Bad Bitch book club pick for the month of January. And like I said, I am really trying to like broaden my horizons with books, and I find that book clubs are like a really easy way, like even virtual ones, to just kind of read something that I would not necessarily pick up for myself. If there's a little bit of like, oh, there's a talk about it and everything else, I find that I will actually read the book. And I've discovered some of my favorite books or different new authors or genres that I like through doing that. So Evil Eye was the Bad Bitch Book Club pick for the month of January. I would not have normally picked this up for myself, like I said. And I ended up really loving this. So this was actually a 5-star read for me, which I knew, I'd say about like 15% of the way through. I was like, I really like this book. It follows Yara, who is a Palestinian American. She is born and raised in New York, who suffers a microaggression from a coworker at work. And as a Black woman, I fully get what she's talking about. The comment that her coworker says to her is racist, and she kind of deals with this whole thing where her faculty is like, that was not racist, and she's like, oh, but it is. And they kind of gaslight her in about it. They send her to therapy, so she also has to really struggle with that, like just having to go to therapy and everything else, and it being like forced on her. And her kind of calling out this coworker for the racist statement kind of just sets off a whole bunch of other things. So there's a trip that she wants to go on with the school, which she is not allowed to go on. Because of that, she also like ends up kind of like losing her job at one point, which also is retaliation for, but they word it in such a way that it's not, which I have experienced as well. Like, it's just, I think it is so well done and so like affirming in a certain way, like as someone who is a visible minority who is aware of things that people do and say sometimes that are micro or macro aggressions towards me, to see it on paper is like so realistic. And I did see a couple reviews of this book where people were like, this is not real and this is just someone like crying, and it's like, no, this is actually what it is like. So I really related to the story a lot. It was very well done. I understood so much where Yara was coming from. Her friendship with Silas is like exceptional and exactly what is needed for this book. Like, it adds so much to the story. Yara has so much growth, and I also think Etaf Run did a really good job of depicting intergenerational trauma and how sometimes our ancestors, or like the elders in our community who we are supposed to respect and look up to, like that's kind of ingrained in you, how they are both victims and perpetrators of trauma for us. So, you know, they grew up with it. It was really rough for them, but they just kind of continue that cycle because they don't know any better, and kind of that struggle sometimes to be the one who is making the decision to, like, it ends with me. It ends right now. And I'm going to do different for the rest of my family moving forward. And I just, yeah, like I said, I normally would not have picked up this book for myself, and I'm so glad that I made the decision to read it, because easily 5-star book, quite possibly my favorite book that I read in January. So at the end of the month, I also created kind of like a summary page. So essentially everything that I have read for the month of January, just kind of like a review, I guess, at the end. So I basically just wrote down all the titles of the books and numbered them, just so I could translate that back into my title page, because I don't know if you noticed, but my books are not necessarily listed. My reviews are not necessarily listed in the order that I read them in. So I did want to kind of have that kind of translate back to the front of the book so I could see kind of what days I've read and whatnot. And then I also included some core stats on there. So books read, the number of pages read, hours listed, my average rating, any books that I DNF'd, series I started, series I finished, how many book club picks I read for the month, and how many books I reread. Partly because I don't always include books that I reread in like my wrap-ups and reviews, but I do think it's good to know, like, I did technically read a book, I just reread the book, I guess, during that period in time. And then I also created a separate spread here, which I kind of like cheekily dubbed superlatives. So I have my favorite book that I read of the month, which is This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. And when I say favorite, I'm not necessarily talking about my highest rated book or anything like that, but the book I enjoyed the most. My least favorite book, which does not include DNFs, so Collide, shouldn't be a shock that that's there. And then for this month, I actually had 2 honorable mentions. So In the Weeds, which I also loved, just not as much as This Could Be Us. And Evil Eye, which really shouldn't be a surprise there either. It was my 5-star book of the month. I loved it. So my favorite and honorable mention, Evil Eye, This Could Be Us, my 2 5-star books. Who's surprised? I also decided to include some pie charts there, and I can't find my like circle maker thing at all, and it's slightly killing me how bad that circle is. I don't know how I thought I would trace a circle in pencil and then like go over it with my pen and it would be fine, but whatever. Just what were you doing there, Ash? But essentially I figured I would start tracking kind of like the different ways that I read books. So format, so is it an audiobook, an ebook, a physical copy? I did mention in my reading journal setup, one of my goals is actually to read a little bit more nonfiction this year. So am I reading fiction? Is it a nonfiction book? What did I rate the book? So how is it kind of like falling for the year? And then also the genres that I'm reading, because I am looking to diversify my reading a little bit as well. And mainly focusing on those 6 or 7 categories there. So for books, I found that I did kind of skew a little bit more towards ebooks, which I'm not really surprised by. I did read a lot of ARCs, and a lot of those are not in like audio format. And I think I only listened to 2 or 3 books. 73%. So I think it was only like three books maybe. That were in audiobook format. I only read fiction for the entire month, so that's just like one big yellow blob. I did read, the majority of the books that I read were romance based, followed by young adult books, and then literary fiction, and then fantasy. So I obviously did not read a sci-fi book, a thriller, mystery, or any nonfiction this month. So looking to add maybe 1 or 2 of those in for the month of February, just so that I'm not kind of like forcing myself or siloing myself in one area. And then finally, my rating breaks down for the books. So I actually track ratings in my other bullet journal as well, and I have this handy dandy rating guide, so I'm going to be sticking to it for in my kind of like my book journal as well. So just keeping those same colors there and then just tracking it in the book. And I just want to say, like, none of this is, these pie charts could be way off. I'm saying that I rated like 3% of my books were 46.2% of my books were 3 stars, which I know is accurate based on the math, but do not ask me if that is actually, like, that pink section there is actually 36.2 or 46.2% of that pie. We're just eyeballing it. We're just, going with God and praying. And then I created a final section here as well that just says my thoughts on January books. So I think it's really easy to say like, oh, I liked this book, I liked that book, but I also wanted to say kind of like my mood and my thoughts overall on how my reading. So was it great? Was it horrible? Did I read a lot of duds in the month? Just whatever that may be, thoughts on the books for the month. I know I also mentioned signing up for book clubs, and one that I have signed up for 2024, and I really kind of hemmed and hawed about whether I wanted to do it, was the Toronto International Festival of Art Authors Virtual Book Club. So the winter 2024 session essentially covers February through June 2024, and there are 5 books with 1 meeting every single month where they discuss a predetermined book. And there's also a fall session. I was really skeptical about signing up for both, even though it's cheaper to sign up for both than to sign up like individually for each one. But I opted to create this spread in my book just to figure out if this was actually something that I enjoy. So we're reading 5 books this year: In the Upper Country by Kai Thomas, Much Ado by Nada by Uzma Jaloudin, The Librarianist by Patrick DeWitt, Half-Life of a Stolen Sister by Rachel Cantor, and A Safe Girl to Love by Casey Platt. So I essentially just created a spread here with all of those books listed, as well as the date that we have our meeting for them. I do have a little space where I'm going to put my star rating for the books as well. And essentially, I just want to know, do I like the books that they pick? Because it's super easy. The books, I'm not saying the books are bad or anything like that, but it's super easy. Some book clubs are not for you because you just don't like the type of books that they're reading. So, yeah. I also am going to add in a section there that has like my overall thoughts so that I can know moving forward whether or not I want to continue in the spring. But another way to diversify my reading. And then I just had a couple more spreads to update, starting with my in-person book club. I know for the month of February, we're going to be reading 7 Days in June by Tia Williams, because we opted to read a romance written by a Black author. So, you know, Black History Month and Valentine's Day kind of like put together. And then I actually set this up off camera, but I ended up adding in a Bad Bitch book club spread. So it's actually 2 pages. The first page is just the book of the month, and then there also is a reading challenge. So there are 20 different prompts for things that you could read through, for like books to tick off during 2024. So that covers things like a book you read exclusively on your phone, or a 2023 award-winning novel, or like a book club pick that you didn't get around to picking before. So essentially, between all the books that I'm planning to read this year, I should be able to tick off 1 or 2 of those there. And then I just updated my A to Z authors. I truly overthought this so much. I was like, do I put it for the author's first name? Do I put it for the author's last name? And I finally just figured I would do author's last names. So Etaf Run and Bal Khabra went there. And then I also updated my series tracker there, just for the Waverly Wildcat series. And then we got into the best book of 2024. So my highest rated book for the month of January was Evil Eye by Etaf Run. So we're just plopping that in there for the January section. I actually think I said it kind of almost on Instagram, but I think Evil Eye is a contender for my top book of 2024. It was absolutely brilliant. I think it's going to be really hard for something to top it, to be honest, but I'm excited to see what else I read, and also like what manages to actually top it. And then I got to my reading tracker spread. So I also set this up off camera, but I added in kind of like a little key for each month, just to see, kind of add some color to the spread really, but also just to see kind of like where things go. So I'm using the mild liner gold for the month of January, and I absolutely love my mild liners. I recently purchased all 35 of them, and they are some of my favorite markers to do stuff with. So I just colored in all the books that I read for the month there. And then we set up our February kind of title page. Usually I'm probably going to be doing these at the end of every single video, just because I need kind of like something to track my reading, or the to maybe read. But essentially the books and things that I am most looking forward to in February are In the Upper Country by Kai Thomas. I'm really excited to dive into A Winter in New York by Josie Silver, even though I've heard that it's not really like wintry, it's a little bit more like autumn, but we'll be diving into that. 7 Days in June, obviously my book club pick. And then The Book of Love by Kelly Fink is it's a fantasy novel, which seems so intriguing to me, so I will be diving into that as well. So yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of funny that there's not a single heart on that spread after using them in January, but oh well, I still know what it is. So that is everything that I read in January of 2024. It was 14 books. We are so excited about all of them. There were some high highs and some low lows, and I will kind of drop on Instagram my review of The Breakup Pact there as well. But please let me know in the comments if you have read any of these books, if you liked them, if I'm missing something with Collide, or if you're part of a book club that maybe I should join as well. But either way, until next time, happy reading and have a great day.